Welcome back, my lovely citizens, and today we are going to be talking about Arceus Lycanroc, which was a concept that I sort of came up with the night before Late Night 33, when I was thinking over different ways to better address Arceus Inteleon, because Arceus Inteleon has been getting very, very popular as of late, being the #2 most played deck behind Mew, so I ended up thinking through different cards that could address this matchup a little bit better, and then sort of stumbled onto Lycanroc, which was a card that I had wanted to make work for a long time. Lycanroc has a attack at the very start for 1 energy that literally just knocks out a Pokemon with 60 HP or less remaining, which is nice for being able to snipe Sobbles, Remoraid, Inkay, or Dunsparce in this case. Dunsparce is the very, very relevant one here, because you can snipe the Dunsparce without needing to boss it up or anything, and then you can hit for weakness on the Arceus, which also lets you help set up for knockout with the extra 30 damage on its second attack in order to try and set up like a checkmate scenario against this. In this tournament on Monday, I played against 6 different Arceus Inteleon lists, beating 4 of them, losing to 1 of them, and tying against 1 of them. And I sort of wanted to make this video not specifically to show off the deck in action, but to go over round by round what each round was like. Sort of give a tournament report on this. So I'm going to show off the list, and then go over what the entire list was about and why I chose what I did, and go through each match individually. So starting off, we have a 4-2 Arceus line, which is fine because some matches you go second and you want to Trinity Charge. It's important to have an Arceus down turn 1, whether or not it's first or second, and to get an energy attachment down. So Arceus is very nice for that. And then a 3-2 Lycanroc line, because you want to be able to get down normally about 2 Lycanroc per game, and at least 1 of them into a VMAX. Then we have 2 Beedrill, 2 Lumineon, 1 Crobat for draw. The 2 Lumineon are to be able to grab out our supporters, because we are playing a relatively low supporter count, and the Beedrill is there to persist sting things like Mew with special energy attached to it, or Jet Spear anything that is weak to grass like Galarian Moltres, which was really relevant in one particular matchup. We also have Galarian Zigzagoon to help us hit that 220 mark with Arceus VSTAR, with a Choice Belt after Double Turbo reduces our damage, which is definitely relevant, and it can also be used in combination with Lycanroc in order to ping something like a Zigzagoon or a Manaphy, and then snipe it with Hunting Claw for a prize if you need a cheeky prize in a certain situation like that. And then we have Flygon, which is mainly for matchups like Ice Rider, where it is a VMAX Pokemon that you otherwise would not be able to one-shot, that only plays basic energy, so you can't kill it with Beedrill. So that is why Flygon is here. It was definitely a good inclusion. It didn't see a lot of use, but I still think it's worth having. Then we have 3 Single Strike style Mustard. It's so we can get 2 Beedrill onto the field normally per game, and even potentially a third one if we're able to Ordinary Rod and then play the third Mustard, but most of the time that won't happen. Most of the time you'll use about 1 to 2 Single Strike Mustard a game. And then we have 3 Professor's Research, 2 Boss, and 1 Raihan. The Boss are obviously just to be able to pull up things, and the Raihan is to be able to potentially burst an attacker into play. Then we have 4 Quick Balls, 4 Ultra Balls, 4 Cram-o-matic, which is very good for thinning out your hand for Mustard. Throughout the entire tournament, I only flipped like 1 or 2 Cram-o-matic heads, and I used it like 12 times, so it has not flipped heads, but we still made top 8. So that goes to show that it's not super, super important to flip heads with this deck to perform well with it. Then 2 Energy Searches, 1 Ordinary Rod, 3 Air Balloon. We'd rather not have the switches because sometimes we don't want to switch out, so being able to just play down the Air Balloon as a pivot option is nice. 2 Choice Belt, 3 Training Court. These are just stadiums that can get us access to the basic energy even if we've had to discard them earlier. 4 Basic Fighting, 3 Basic Grass, and 3 Double Turbo. It's nice having the 2 Energy Search and the 3 Training Court, because that's essentially 5 more basic energy outs. And Cram-o-matic can, if we flip heads, potentially grab a Double Turbo turn 1 to set up the Arceus, if we don't already have one in hand to start off. Alright, so considering that, let's look at round 1. Round 1, I was up against Jace Patrick's Arceus Moltres build, which was not playing the Inteleon engine, it was playing just a more aggro Crobat V build, and it had 2 Galarian Moltres, 1 Galarian Moltres V, a Hoopa V, which honestly I think makes a lot of sense in this meta, because it's hitting for those 2 different relevant weaknesses, a Galarian Zapdos. We're not going to go over this entire list because it's not a deck profile for them, but the way that we were able to address this matchup is they weren't playing Dunsparce, so we were able to pretty easily get knockouts on the Arceus V-Star, as well as the Crobat also being weak. And then in the end of the game, we were able to go Arceus knockout, Crobat knockout, and then Galarian Moltres knockout with the Beedrill for game. So it was honestly a pretty easy first game. It's definitely a very good matchup for this deck because we hit for weakness on most of their attackers, and even the Galarian Zapdos or the Hoopa can be knocked out by either just Arceus with Choice Belt plus Zigzagoon ping, or just Lycanroc with Choice Belt. So it's pretty easy to get those knockouts in that particular matchup. Alright, in round 2, we were up against Mew. Hold up. Actually, no, we were not up against Mew. That's their matchups. Okay, we were up against Arceus and Inteleon round 2. And in this matchup, it went basically exactly as I thought it would. Going first, we were able to get an attachment down. Turn 2, we were able to evolve, use the ability, grab Choice Belt and Boss, attach Double Turbo, boss up the Arceus V that they had on the bench. Then we accelerated to our Lycanroc. Next turn, we were able to go up with the Lycanroc, snipe a Dunsparce, take a prize, and then knock out the Arceus on the next turn. I think they only got 1 knockout through that entire game because they weren't able to one-shot our Arceus or one-shot our Lycanroc. So after the Lycanroc went down, we were just able to boss for game on the following turn. Then next round, round 3, we were up against Jolteon. It was a pretty straightforward matchup. Unfortunately, our opponent did brick, but I think we had enough of an advantage even if they didn't brick to where we were able to pull ahead. It was a pretty... They went first in this matchup, and it was a pretty straightforward going second, being able to get an Arceus and a Lycanroc down, and then double turbo accelerate to the Lycanroc. It was definitely very easy to get a Lycanroc set up, and then they couldn't exactly keep pace at that point. In round 4, we were up against Urshifu Moltres, which was one of the harder early game matchups, but they did end up whiffing the damage they needed for game. I believe all they needed was Telescopic Sight to get game, but they were 20 short on sniping our Lumineon for game. I think that was the main situation there, but in that we were able to take some early Sobble knockouts when we weren't able to get an actual specific knockout, which was nice for slowing down our opponent, and then I believe we got to two-shot a Urshifu and set up damage on one of their bench Pokemon. I forget specifically what their list was. Okay, they were playing the Galarian Moltres V. Okay, that makes sense. So this matchup, we essentially started by sniping a Sobble, then I believe we two-shotted an Urshifu while putting damage on a benched Moltres, and I think we killed the Moltres the next turn. So they were one turn off of game, and if they had Telescopic Sight in that scenario, I think they would have beaten us. But other than that, it was fine. After that, we fought against Marco, who was playing Suicune Birds. It was a huge box deck. They were playing Galarian Zapdos, they were playing Galarian Moltres, they were playing Suicune, they were playing Vikavolt. It was definitely an interesting box deck to see, and it was really cool to see that they were 4-0 at the time as well. Going through this, we were sort of able to just go with an easy knockout early game on Crobat. Then we hit into a Suicune, I believe, and set up damage on something else on the bench. And then we were able to follow up with a Hunting Fangs onto the Suicune, to take that knockout there after they retreated to the bench after they were damaged in that way. Then we were also able to get another 2-prize knockout sometime in that, but that was not hard to do, being able to set up 2 attackers. So I believe it was Crobat knockout with Arceus, and then we hit with Lycanroc into the Suicune. The Suicune hit into us the turn before that, then retreated in order to go back to the bench, but then we chased it with the Lycanroc anyway. The next round, we were up against another Arceus Inteleon build. Same straightforward approach. We were able to go first, and we got the advantage there. We went Arceus knockout, accelerate to Lycanroc. Lycanroc hunt the Dunsparce, then knock out the Arceus, and then whichever thing they chose to knock out, they still would have to take 2 knockouts for the rest of the game, and then we just took 1 more knockout and won the game. The next round, we were up against Bruno, which we went second in this matchup, which was fine. But the problem was, there was one specific situation. We started very early with a Beedrill in hand and had to research it away, and then we later on had a turn where we had Single Strike Mustard in hand for the next turn, and they had Arceus V-Star with a double turbo on it in the active and took a knockout on us the previous turn. We went up with a Lycanroc that had a balloon on it, but unfortunately the Lycanroc was not fully set up. It just had the 1 energy on it for the Hunting Fangs attack. We were hoping to get a Beedrill onto the field and be able to attack with it to knock out this Arceus for 1 energy, which would have been good, and also would have prevented them from winning the game there, because they had 2 prizes remaining, and our only more than 1 prize Pokemon on the field at that time was our Lycanroc VMAX. So the goal was to Single Strike Mustard for the Beedrill, but unfortunately that turn we top-decked the Beedrill, and thus could not draw or put down the Beedrill to get the attack off. So unfortunately, that was just an unfortunate top-deck situation, and also our Ordinary Rod was prized, so it was hard to get the Single Strike Mustard play off in that game. Next round, we were also against Arceus Inteleon, and we were able to redeem ourselves from the previous round. Same general thing. I believe we also went second in that match, but we were able to pull off the Beedrill play, and thus were able to go Arceus KO, Accelerate, Beedrill KO, then Hunting Fangs, then attack with the Max Edge Lycanroc attack to take the game there. So that was definitely a lot of fun. Then round 9, we were up against Ledboy, who was playing Ice Rider. The goal in this matchup was definitely to get the Flygon out and be able to accelerate onto it. Unfortunately, we didn't get to set up the Flygon in time. We made a decent play at the very start, but I believe there was one specific situation that I misplayed, not realizing that I did not have Ordinary Rod in deck, when I could have Ordinary Rodded back something, where I played Energy too early, not conservatively, and then didn't have Ordinary Rod to put Energy back into deck to accelerate onto the Flygon. So I definitely could have played that match better and leaned more into the Flygon play, so it's definitely something to keep in mind for playing in the future, but it was still a very, very close game. It did come down to whether or not they had a knockout that turn, which, honestly, it's not all that hard to have with Ice Rider, because all they really need is Choice Belt plus Melanie in that case. So yeah, it was definitely... I wouldn't say that it's a terrible matchup, but it's definitely more rough than other matchups, because it's a Pokemon that tanks most of the hits in the deck, and also only uses basic energy, so you can't knock it out with Beedrill. After that, we were 7-2 and moving on to Phase 2. We ended up playing against 2 Arceus Inteleon birds in a row, where we honestly had a better time than the regular Arceus Inteleon builds, because we were sort of able to just set up checkmate scenarios, and they also did not play Dunsparce. So in a lot of cases, it was really just knock out a 2-prizer with Arceus, accelerate onto Lycanroc. They took a knockout using Galarian Zapdos, so they took 2 prizes, they kept pace, but then we just followed up with either Choice Belt or Zigzagoon Ping plus Lycanroc to knock out the Zapdos, and then knocked out an Arceus in return. It was not super difficult. It was definitely one of the easier matchups we had. We had that same matchup back-to-back in rounds 10 and 11. Then, me, being an idiot, looked through the pairings and was like, hey, I think 30 points guarantees. And then proceeded to ID 2 rounds before realizing that 25 points 2 rounds prior could have won 2 in a row to make 31 points. And then I was like, oh, I'm not going to make top 8 if I don't play this last round. So we ID'd against Arceus Inteleon, and then we ID'd against Arceus Charizard, which, again, we should not have done. We should have just played for another win and then ID'd past that. But it's fine, because in round 14, we played against another Arceus Inteleon deck, and we won against that. I believe they actually whiffed by 20 damage, because it was a very, very close game. It came down to the wire, but unfortunately they did not have a way to set up their Arceus to take a KO without using double turbo energy, and the double turbo energy put them 20 off of taking a knockout on our Lycanroc VMAX for game. So we ended up taking that game in the same general way, where we were sniping 60 HP Pokemon, whether it was Sobble or Dunsparce, and then taking knockouts on the Arceuses. And unfortunately, even though they did go first, they ended up losing out by whiffing by 20 damage on our Lycanroc. So after that, we ended up going into top 8, at Seed 2, which was the highest seed I've ever gone into Top Cut, which was nice. And then we ended up playing against, oh god, the nightmare of this deck, Malamar, which theoretically shouldn't be terrible if you can sit behind a Lycanroc early game and hope that they don't get a knockout while you're sniping their support like Remoraid's or Inkays and trying to get them off the board. The problem being that this particular deck that we were up against, on turn 3, got a 320 damage knockout on our Lycanroc, and then we lost practically all momentum. And then from there, they were just able to go 280 damage, 280 damage. Then we moved to Game 2. Game 2, we went first. Unfortunately, we whiffed a knockout on turn 2 because we had a Zigzagoon stuck in the active, I believe. I'm not 100% sure. That might have been Game 1. But same thing happened. They ended up basically hitting the numbers that they needed practically every time. I feel like Malamar is a very hard matchup, and the only thing that I might tech for that matchup is a Big Charm. Because, honestly, I don't know what else you can really tech for it, unless you're trying to get, like, really spicy by playing, like, a 1-1 Mimikyu and an Acerola, or, like, a Shadow Rider V, and trying to Raihan double turbo onto that and remove 2 Inkays, but I don't know how long an Inkay would be on the field for you to be able to do that. That being said, it was a really good run, ending off at 10-3-2, and I honestly think the list has a lot of potential for, like, Indianapolis, EUIC, maybe. I think it has potential. I think it's worth testing out and worth trying with. I'm between a few different things for EUIC, but thank you all for listening. This has been the first tournament report that I've done on this channel. Let me know in the comments if you like this, and like and subscribe if you did, and I hope to talk to you all later. Have a good rest of your night.